Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Ariella and Biniam. So I've been catching up to the current situation. So this story came out a while ago. This episode was a while ago that I reacted to, in which Ariella was talking about taking the child away if he continued to bring up his religious ideas. Big Papa says, I hate how Ari knows how much trauma and fear that Binny has about her stealing his child from him like his ex-wife did, and she seems almost proud of herself and threatening him with that at the slightest inconvenience to get what she wants. Yeah, I don't know what's happening between the couple, day in and day out, but the little bit that we've seen, it seems really hurtful and scary to threaten someone with taking their child. It's one thing to threaten divorce, like if you're both in the same town, like, a family in Seattle, you're like, if you don't change, I'm going to divorce you. That's one thing. It's another thing to say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to leave you and you're never going to see your child again, or you're very unlikely to see your child again. Wow. I mean, yeah. And from the beginning, what I've been saying is Ariella has every right to complain and say, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that. But I don't think anyone has the right to threaten with she has the ability to do that. She has privilege. She has the power. She has the money. She has the green card citizenship issue. He can't just bop over to the United States to see her. And so for her to use that as a threat. Now, I understand why she would think that, right? That she would say, look, if things don't work out with me and Biniam, I don't want to be with him anymore. Okay, that makes sense. 2, I don't want to live in Ethiopia. Why would I live in Ethiopia? Just because, I would rather go back home, go back to the United States. I get that too. So I understand that impulse, but to threaten to take a child away from a parent because you have that power is uncool. Leah P. Organa says, this is not me excusing Ari's behavior at all, but it's so bizarre to me that Binny has so much trauma regarding his ex, and he still went ahead and dated and impregnated someone who could do this exact same to him, especially since Ari, at her core, seems like she has the capacity of being really cruel. I just wonder how it plays into Binny's traumas. Yeah, it is interesting that for Biniam, he would risk that again by marrying and having a child with someone from across the world and the United States in particular, when it was such a trauma for him. Why would you do that? Yeah, who knows? It's from the outside, it's like, well, that doesn't seem wise, but you fall in love with who you fall in love with, and there's not a lot you can do. Then you ask, I wonder how it plays into Biniam's traumas, and that's a great question. Maybe he's like, I'm going to make this one work this time. This is me being able to start over, and I want to kind of recreate that. Maybe it's a subconscious thing. We do this all the time. Freud called it repetition compulsion. There are other terms for it that we use, but you out there might, when you reflect on your past significant relationships, you might find patterns and wonder, why do I keep choosing or developing the same dynamic with certain people? Sometimes it's because of a subconscious need to right the wrongs of the past by recreating the past in the present. Sometimes that actually works, but sometimes it just repeats the past, and then we just have more reason to repeat it in the future. Mayhem says, I actually agree with Ariella on the hell part, meaning that for Biniam, he was bringing up the concept of hell, and she was saying, if you bring that up in front of our kid, I'm going to leave. I don't want any talk of that in my home about hell, although I disagree with threatening to take the child away. Yeah. And, like I've been saying from the beginning, there's nothing wrong with Ariella saying, look, I don't want this in the house, I don't want that in the house. He has every right to say, I do want this in the house. Like there's this assumption that the couple makes, essentially, because she possesses so much more power emotionally and practically, that if, she doesn't want hell talk in the house, and she just assumes like, okay, I have now decreed and I have threatened you about taking the child away. She can be adamant. She can be, very, this is a hill I will die on for sure, if that's a big deal to someone. But how come she gets her way in that? What if it's a hill to die on for him? What if he's like, look, this is some, and if you're an atheist or someone who doesn't believe in hell, then you're going to relate to Ariella. But we all understand that couples, each person can assert their, the style of parenting that they want to do within reason, right? You can't say, I'm going to raise my kid to be a QAnon follower or something. But you can certainly say, I want my child to believe in my religion and the dogma thereof and the dominant religion of this country, because I don't know, it's just what I believe in. And so, but it's something you work out. You don't say either you change or I'm leaving you and taking your child away from you. You say, let's talk about it. And what a lot of, I think, functional parents will land on is, in this situation with religious differences, is that they each will respect the other parent, but try to influence the kid within reason, and then allow the child the emotional space to choose. It's a tricky area, because if you pressure a child, they might feel like they have to please you by agreeing, and so there's not a lot of volition there. But some of you may have grown up in families like that, where one parent was this and the other parent was that, and you were just like, and you might have vacillated between the two. And that's kind of the best case scenario, or at least one of the best case scenarios anyway. Another best case scenario is that the parents don't say anything and they just believe internally. The other possible scenario is that the parents agree to choose one, if one person is okay with that. Anyway, there's a lot of approaches. Then Ariella Biniam episode where they went into the crowd, and Ariella was having a bit of an anxiety episode around it. Annie says, I got stressed out just watching this celebration on TV the first time. I've noticed a lot of people who like big celebrations don't quite understand that other people hate these kinds of things. It's not fun for everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Crowds can be really, really stressful for some people. They can also be enjoyable for some people. But how do we talk to each other, and how do we support each other in that experience? The two of them just sort of like head into the crowd without checking in with each other. Like, do you want to do this? Hey, we're about to go in a crowd. I'm about to freak out. Instead, it was a lot of blame, which is kind of the theme of this couple, actually. Instead of saying, hey, when you turn your phone off, it really scares me and I feel like you don't love me. Hey, when you criticize me frequently about things I don't feel like I deserve to be criticized about, I turn off my phone. Instead of those kind of I statements, it's, the blame and the reaction, and then the blame, and then the resentment that I'm worried about, honestly, building up. Anyway, Megan says, I am loving the tangent about baby wearing and slings. I was talking about slings and, having your baby close. I think I was going on the tangent because I'm not sure, but because Americans often think they have the best parenting practices and the rest of the world is ridiculous, when empirically and scientifically that's just not even true. Americans have some atrocious parenting practices that are actually harming children, and we see results of that. Increased suicide rates, depression, anxiety, all sorts of problems with adults that are in part, theoretically, or, a lot of people believe in my field that it's due to attachment disruptions, due to parenting style, and due to shaming. You will get shamed if you parent your child in what I believe to be a healthier way. By other people. I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like sleeping with your 2-year-old in your bed. Not every family needs to sleep with their 2-year-old in the bed, but there's certainly nothing wrong with sleeping with your 2-year-old every night. There's nothing wrong with that. The rest of the world, and particularly throughout the history of our species, I'm pretty sure that's what we've always done. 20,000 years ago, little Jennifer didn't have her own bedroom. Like you just slept under a tree, and you probably slept very close to each other. We probably are designed for that kind of physical warmth and proximity and heartbeat and breathing and safety, So the fact that Americans would shame someone, or breastfeeding past a certain date, or I don't know, just certain things that Americans, we tend to be very on one side of like, don't raise a mama's boy. And I'll tell you that the general problem with that is your efforts to make your child independent too early will make them too dependent. The way to make a child independent, meaning that they have the confidence to move away from you while occasionally checking back in with you, but feel like knowing that they can go back to you, but also knowing that they're safe enough to head into the world. The way that you do that is by making them feel extremely safe and secure, and that they can depend on you. And you do that by physical proximity in a lot of ways. Attunement, listen to all my stuff on attachment. But when we make children feel like, I got you, as a parent, you're just like, I got you. I see you. I notice you. I know what's happening. I'm here. When you're struggling, when you're in distress, when you're hurt, when you're afraid, I'm here. And maybe sometimes that means at night that I'm here to sleep with you. You're afraid at night. You got a nightmare. Come here. I'm here. I got you. Let's sleep together and let's get through this together. Or I'll go to your bed and I'll sleep in your bed with you. The practices are varied. Every family is different. But generally speaking, when a child, and every child is different, when a child is, by the time they're 5 years old, they feel like, yeah, my parent, they're there for me. When I'm struggling, I can turn to them. They notice me. Sometimes I don't even have to turn to them. They see me. They notice me. They know what's happening. Now, that doesn't mean you have to hover over your child all the time. But, some level of awareness of what your child is going through, particularly when they're upset. When a child really feels that way, and that requires a lot of interaction, including starting out with slings. A child being 5 feet away in a stroller. I mean, some of these strollers are like motorcycle size, and to see the infant, you got to like really get in there. Some of them are backwards. Anyway, point is that there's nothing wrong with strollers, but you can certainly be attuned. But how much easier it is to attune and notice a child when they're right here, when they're just like, they make a little noise. You're like, oh, and that physical closeness, that the heartbeat and the warmth and the breath and the visual, like children, infants can see very close to their face, their field of focus is very close. Why? Because they're designed they're designed to be very close to the parents, and they can't be constantly pushing you away to see you, right? So their field of focus is very close. So having them very close, is helpful to that end. But anyway, so Megan was saying that she loves my tangent, which I just did again. I wore both of my babies as often as possible in ring slings, and I loved it. I got a lot of questions and strange looks at times. Ugh. It was something I was very passionate about, and I love this random validation from Dr. Honda. Yeah, slings are something. You don't have to use slings, but the attention on what does this child need to feel safe? Because here's the key. Because Americans will say, well, you don't want to make a mama's boy. You don't want to make a dependent person, right? Someone who is codependent, which is what the lay people will call it, and some clinicians. Listen to my whole deep dive on codependency for that stuff, but independent personality disorder. But here's the thing. When you try to push a child away from you, like you're too needy, when they're 18 months old, you're like, you're too needy. You need to be able to do things on your own. Two things will happen. One, they either get extremely afraid of being alone because they're constantly being pushed away from you and will be very clingy to you for the rest of their life. They will be clingy to you or their spouse or someone because that early experience of danger of being pushed too early away from you. Or they give up on attachment altogether consciously. They will be like, well, I guess I got to do things on my own. Deep down, they're desperate for closeness, and this is what we call avoidant attachment. So if you want to screw someone up, if you want to make someone either extremely clingy or pathologically independent, then push them away early. When a child comes to you, if you have the capacity, which, hopefully you do, let them in, bring them in and say, I'm here, I got you. Because once they feel that safety, they want to move away from you. If you want to create an independent person, it requires them to be you to be very available to them. Because from day one, anyone who's raised children knows this, kids want to be independent. You don't need to push them into independence. You don't have to make them do things on their own. I mean, there's nuances there. Sometimes you want to help kids push a little further. You want to, hey, I think you can do this on your own. But you want to be there if they have a meltdown. You want to gauge that. It's like, I think you can do that on your own because you're a strong little girl and you're smart. And she's like, oh, okay. And then she does it. But let's say you do that and then she tries it and she freaks out. Well, you got to be there because when she knows that you're there, this is the model that I use, is that we internalize the safety. 0 to 5, we're like, am I safe? Do you got me? Am I okay? Is the world safe enough for me to, venture off? And if I'm always going back and I always get that security and that safe, secure base, I internalize that and I carry it with me even though I'm not around. So I'm in first grade and my parents aren't there and I'm having a weird thing on recess, but I've internalized the safety of my parents and I can kind of go to that subconsciously so that I don't need to run home or I don't need to run to a teacher. I can kind of like depend on my own independence because I've carried those figures with me. By the way, this is, for you therapists out there and clients, I suppose, this is completely analogous or the same mechanism that will bring our mentors or therapists with us. You might, and some people have even commented that you bring me with you because you hear me talk so often that you've internalized me. And that's totally welcome. Some people, oh, is that creepy? No, I've internalized mentors and people that I respect. And that's a part of our health, is that when we find a secure base, someone that we respect, and it's a healthy voice that's from the outside, we internalize it and then it becomes internal. So clients I know will be progressing well with therapy in our relationship when they report that to me. They'll be like, yeah, the other day I was talking to my husband and your voice popped into my head and so I decided to do X, Y, and Z instead of what I usually did. And that's a good sign. Hopefully the voice is helpful is the thing. Good old Lavender says, Biniam thinks she is full of spirits. I think that's one of the reasons why he surprises her with religious ceremonies. Yeah, the more and more it's interesting how on the show they kind of, I think, purposely omit as much religious talk as possible. When I was watching Welcome to Plathville, no, even Plathville, they kind of left it out too. No, when I was watching Married at First Sight, there's much more talk about religion, like with Chris and Paige. It was like very explicit. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of normal for people to organize their life and their narrative around their religions. Why are and Welcome to Plathville and on 90 Day Fiancé, why is it almost never discussed? Or not discussed to the extent that I think it matters to these individuals? I don't know. Maybe it's a marketing decision of some kind, but we could imagine, we don't know, that Biniam, and he's, I think, essentially said as much, that he believes that when Ariella is annoying him, that she's possessed or that she is full of evil spirits and needs to be cleansed with, magic water. Jenny and Summit, German Snout says, imagine if Summit had diarrhea and was throwing up all night. His mom would be all about teaching Jenny how to nurse her poor sick little boy back to health. Yeah, true. Katarine says, also bothers me that Jenny is sick in her own room and this woman and man come in to interrogate her. What was Summit's father doing in there? What if Jenny sleeps in the nude? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Sarah says, suspicious that Jenny gets sick right after having the mother's cooking, and then the mother proudly proclaims she cooks even if she has diarrhea. The 20 years of food handling in me wants to rage. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Like, the next day, she's very sick and has diarrhea, which, lends itself to the hypothesis that she's had some kind of foodborne illness, and there's no discussion of that. Samya says, Indian here. I think in general, in India, health is neglected to a certain extent. If someone has diarrhea or a fever, it's not considered a big sign. It's not considered as big of a deal. But yes, for women, it is particularly worse since they have to do the chores regardless of how sick they might be, which is terrible. It's interesting, I'm more and more through the reaction videos and your comments in particular, learning that I know almost nothing about Indian culture. I don't think I thought I knew much, but I'm just really realizing like how little I had a different idea. I knew about the traditional caste system, but of the Indian people I've met in Seattle, I just didn't see, or at least notice, this kind of stuff where it's extremely misogynistic and sexist. Like, what Samya is saying is, for women, it's particularly worse since they have to do the chores regardless of how sick they might be. Like, and that was exhibit. I think that's why the Jenny and Summit episodes, segments are so triggering to me. I'm just like, this is massively misogynistic. Like, the attitudes that I'm seeing is not okay. Like, the more and more I realize, the more they are seemingly, I don't know, treating Jenny like she's a slave, like she's a servant, and they all feel like, yeah, this is, no one. Summit isn't even tempering it. Summit isn't, well, not much anyway. Summit's like, hey, you can't treat my wife like a servant. She's sick. Let it go. Cook your own food. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, we'll all chip in. And to the way the mom talk, the tone of voice, the words she uses. Now, some would say, well, wait, the mom, how can she be misogynistic? Well, everyone internalizes sexism, regardless of gender. So women can absolutely perpetrate sexist harm to others for various reasons. One, of internalization and just brainwashing by society, but also because of the effort of trying to gain the approval of the patriarchy. Sometimes you have to, or whatever system of power you're in, sometimes you have to appeal to those in power by exhibiting the same oppression that they exhibit. And this is shown in all sorts of contexts and identities. The other thing that I've been hypothesizing is that the mom a long time ago had to make a deal with the devil of, well, I don't want to be treated like a servant, but I'm being treated like a servant. So what do I do? Well, I have to give in to all these notions of like, I don't matter, and that that's my job in life, is to serve everyone, and no one cares about my feelings. And regardless of how sick I am, I have to do it anyway. And she internalized that. And also this is total hypothesis. She said, when I have a daughter-in-law myself, then finally I will be able to foist at least half or a lot of the chores onto this person, and then I can finally relax. I can finally retire from misogyny, from misogynistic abuse. And then Jenny comes along, and it's like, wait, she's older than me, and she's American, and so there's no one I can foist this onto. Now, what some people say was, well, what about the other daughter-in-law? I don't know. I can't know that. Anyway, Darcy, Bears All episode. By the way, Bears All has been really interesting to watch. I can't believe it's taken me this, I think it came out like a year ago. It can be kind of frivolous and goofy, but there's also some stuff in Bears All that I'm like, oh, that was a detail I didn't know about this individual. But anyway, when Darcy was on Bears All, anxiety, someone on YouTube's name is just anxiety, etc. I really appreciate the tangent about issues that arise with students. I'm a new professor and I'm having an issue with a specific student. It gives me a better idea of how to approach it. Thank you. I needed to hear this today. Well, I'm kind of forgetting what tangent I went on about the students, about my students, but I think it might have been about student safety, feeling emotionally safe, and how when they don't feel safe, they will... Oh yeah, that's right. It was Darcy was complaining about Tom and Jesse in very specific ways where I was like, really, that's the best you can come up with in terms of like why you didn't like these people? Like that Jesse had a security security camera that was out in the open in his house, which is, common for a lot of people for, break-ins and that kind of thing. And I was hypothesizing that, because I've seen this with students where they will not feel safe in a class, and many of the students won't feel safe. And so they will feel like, I don't like this. And instead of sort of noticing that and feeling the ability to assert that with the powers that be, they will focus on these little things like the syllabus had a typo in it, or the professor was 5 minutes late to class. These really, and when I would step in as a outsider professor, as a program director, as the boss of professors, I would step in and investigate these situations, and I would hear the complaints from the students, and I'm like, why are you, I get it, you didn't like that, but why are you so worked up over such little things? And I would always find that it was because the professor did not create safety, did not create a sense of, or at least that was my hypothesis, the professor did not set up a vibe, an emotional vibe that was open, that was safe, that was clear. Like sometimes the syllabus was kind of not very clear in terms of what the requirements were, or the lectures weren't very clear. Anyway, Stella Annie, good old Stella Annie, says, I love hearing your comment about the tone thing. I grew up with the notion that it's just a silly little woman thing to care about tone. Very validating to know it's okay to pay attention to that. Yeah, it's interesting to get this kind of comment because it makes me wonder if I don't talk about tone very much. But with my couples, I would say 10% of the time we're talking about tone. And because it's almost universal that people will have bad tone or bad demeanor, their facial expression, bad meaning, one, not really reflecting how they feel, and two, extremely hurtful to the other person or scary to the other person. And then, your words might be like, hey, when you take out the garbage, I need you to make sure you put the lid on all the way. So you can say that in a variety of ways. So you're just saying something verbal, verbatim wise, that makes sense. But if you have a different tone, like, hey, when you put the garbage in the garbage can, I need you to put the lid down securely. Okay. So I really exaggerated that, but that, it's not really far from, the people I treat, and really every couple that I see for that matter. And there are two things. One is that the tone really can affect the other person, obviously, and really trigger people. But two is the person exhibiting the tone is almost never aware of the fact that they have tone because of the tones that they saw when they were children. It just became part of their, options, and it just was normalized. And so what I was saying in the video is whatever tone your family had, your parents, your siblings, that you hated, all the tone, you're like, oh, like the way my dad talks, sometimes his tone is just like really hurtful and like annoying or blah, blah, blah. It's pretty assured that you have that tone as well. So that's a beginning place. The other thing is just to ask your partner, like, do I ever have bad tone? The other thing to say in the moment is, hey, tone. I work on this with couples a lot of like, because what'll happen is someone will have tone and then it'll trigger the other person and then you end up fighting, but you're not really fighting. You're not really discussing what's really happening. So what I tell my couples to do is in the moment when someone has tone with you is to say, hey, tone, just some kind of, and the toned person has to accept that because in their heart, they're like, well, I don't have tone right now, but it's like, you have to assume that if someone's pointing out your tone, you probably have bad tone. So take a breath. Say the exact same thing again. Doesn't shut you down. That's a big key. Someone saying, hey, tone, it doesn't silence you. It just means take a breath, relax, get to your happy, differentiated place, and maybe word it a little differently and with no tone, Hey, when you put the garbage in the garbage can, hey, tone. Oh, okay. Hey, no big deal. You could really help me out. When you put the garbage in the garbage can, can you make sure the lid is shut? No big deal. Okay. One, you're saying the same gosh darn thing, but one is obviously triggering and the other is not. And I would imagine all couples have this issue. And the other thing to know is that when you're the recipient of tone, don't assume that you understand what they're meaning. Like tone can be very deceptive about what the intent is. Someone can have tone with you and it can feel like they're yelling at you, but they're not actually meaning to yell at you. And you can absolutely say tone, but you can also say, I wonder if they didn't mean that tone. And try not to be triggered by misperceiving their tone, if that makes sense. Anyway, but announcement to everyone, Stella Annie, who just left that comment, announcement time. We are awarding Stella Annie with the 2021 Psychology in Seattle YouTube Commenter Award. We're doing this for Discord and the Facebook fan page and also for YouTube. So good old Stella Annie, famous patron Stella Annie, she's a patron as well, has won a Psychology in Seattle award, which we give out every year, and we're going to send her some swag. I emailed you, Stella, by the way, because your email's on Patreon, and I need an address to send you. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be. I think it's going to be a mug. I'm not sure, but anyway, I just want to thank Stella Annie and everyone else. Lavender. All y'all that I see commenting often. I'll tell you, back in the day, 5 years ago, our channel on YouTube wasn't very popular, and we didn't have a lot of dedicated fans on YouTube. And the comment section was horrible and really, really stressful for me. By the way, if you're familiar with this, William Osman on YouTube, he's a semi-famous YouTuber. He does like comedy engineering videos. And he actually recently published a video called I'm Done. He's a successful, he's living the dream. He has over 1 million subscribers, maybe a lot more than that. And very popular. But because of the comment section on YouTube, he's quitting. Just because of how hurtful and how distressful the comments can be. And so, if you're interested in watching that, just Google in William Osman I'm Done video. There's a lot in that video that I can relate to a great deal, particularly in the past. Now, though, there are two things. One is that people like Stella Annie and Lavender and others are really cool. I mean, it's like you can disagree with me. You can just say some random thing like an observation. All that's fine. But some people can, say things that really just cut to my core. It'll really just fester inside of me. And they really go into that in this video. It's like you can have 1,000 good comments and one bad one, and your brain will just fixate on that one bad comment. And that would happen to me. And there was a time when I just couldn't read the comments. The other thing is that the podwife, Stacy, will curate the comments for me, protect me from things. The other thing I'll say is that a lot of you are just extremely nice, differentiated, mature, considerate individuals on the YouTube, comment section, which is kind of rare. I mean, a lot of channels, I was watching someone sent me a video of Trisha Paytas talking about me, and in their comment section, it was, because I was looking in the comment section, everyone was bashing Trisha. And I was like, this was on Trisha's YouTube channel. And I thought, why are they, it's so mean. It's so vicious. And maybe Trisha deserves it. I don't know their situation. But anyway, my point is that the YouTube comments, the YouTubers, all y'all who comment are, generally speaking, much more conscientious and considerate than what I normally see. And I want to encourage more of that. I want to encourage supporting each other. You can disagree with each other, but be nice. Say, hey, I get what you're saying, but here's my take. Just be courteous. Think about how you're coming across. If you're angry and triggered, take a beat, wait a day, then comment. Don't comment right away. Protect each other, and be nice to me, because there have been times where, and I'm not going to do this, but where, like William Osmond, I'm like, I'm done. I just can't. It's not worth it, because when you create content, you want that interaction. It's like it's like performing on stage like a song, and 5 people stand up and say, you're the dumbest musician I've ever seen, even though everyone else seems to be fine with it. Those 5 people, it's just like, well, I guess I can't do it anymore. And but anyway, point is that Stella Annie is absolutely one of the good ones. So through thick and thin, Stella Annie has been there, and you deserve the YouTube Commenter Award of this year. Farina says, thank you for acknowledging the tone thing. I sometimes hear myself talk in a similar tone to my mom, or even a toxic ex in confrontational situations, and I hate that. That very dismissive, sarcastic, and cold tone, and I use a lot of similar words and sentences that they used towards me when I was young. I've definitely learned to mimic that in an effort to protect myself, but I know others don't really deserve that. Yeah, Farina, you are extremely self-aware, which is great. Wen says, Dr. Honda, I just want to thank you for improving my speaking skills when making requests, or instead of reacting and getting defensive in an argument. I now feel more observant of my phrasing with people, or giving a complete and calm sentence of what my needs are, or simply why I'm upset. I cannot thank you enough. Your videos have helped me make a better, and have helped me be a better, make me be better spoken of my needs in calm, organized, and assertive ways. You rock. Well, that's music to my ears, Wen. That's exactly why I do this thing. So I'm glad and it really goes a long way, right? Like awareness, self-awareness, knowing how to phrase things. And as I often say, it's no wonder that people aren't very good at it, because they might have literally never had a guide. Their parents didn't talk that way. Their friends didn't talk that way. The internet doesn't talk that way. TV shows don't talk that way. Sarah says, I hover around my husband when he's cooking, and I micromanage him. I don't know where it comes from, because I'm not an amazing cook. I am working on it, though. Well, good for you, Sarah. A lot of self-awareness. Absolutely. Yeah, micromanaging. If you're a micromanager, of your kids, you really want to take a look at that. Corey and Evelyn, Rainy Day, says, yes, Evelyn's tears are because she has been humiliated, not because of the breakup with Corey. Yeah. So, Evelyn's tears is kind of interesting, right? Because on one hand, I think it is humiliation based, but I think on the other hand, she feels very hurt. It appears as though Evelyn has a lot of traumas about being abandoned, and but you might look at her and you'd be like, but you broke up with him. Relational traumas aren't logical. Anne Frank says, There's one point I disagree with you, Kirk. She's not hurt or crying because she likes Corey. She's hurt because she realized that she's not the most important woman in the universe and she is entirely replaceable. She's hurt because her ego took a bashing and she thought she had Corey wrapped around her finger. Yeah, certainly that's a possible or a viable hypothesis. It's just not usually the way I look at things, but none of us really know. It's certainly viable for you to believe that and see that in her, but and it certainly looks that way at times. But I'm hypothesizing that Evelyn has a lot of deep, deep emotional traumas around abandonment and around maybe not being good enough. And she's coming from you can almost think of it as a very immature place. Like when you're 10 years old, you're not exactly mature in terms of your navigation of relationships, and you don't take responsibility for your own behavior typically. And so it kind of feels like that. Anyway, Caroline says, don't forget, Dr. Honda, Corey also had to get 6-pack abs. That was in her list of demands before she agreed to marry him. LOL. Yeah, I forgot about that. For Ebersol says, love your videos, Dr. Kirk. My husband and I love watching and hearing everything you have to say. It helps us learn about others and ourselves. We know this isn't therapy, but has definitely benefited our lives in positive ways. Keep the videos coming. I will do that. Danielle and Mohammed video from last week. Jenny says, I feel like her whole quest for an annulment was her trying to stay attached to him. It was so frustrating to watch the first time, but now I am just sad for her. Yeah, she seems really bent on staying in a relationship with him, because she misses him and loves him and wants to be with him. But the entitlement and the behaviors that she exhibits is upsetting to watch. It's coming from a very socially awkward, kind of meek woman, but make no doubt about it, if a woman like that can terrorize you, terror and stalking and abuse and emotional fear can come from a human of any size and gender. So those behaviors are not okay. And yeah, it's, you still feel sad for her. You're just like, oh, it's coming from, but it doesn't justify that behavior. Anyway, Victoria says, Dr. Honda, why do you think Danielle is always smiling when she's discussing something horrible? My dog is barking. It's hard to say. Could be nervousness. That's my guess. A feeling of superiority is an option, but it doesn't seem likely that that's it. Could be that she's aware of the cameras and just kind of nervous. Could be sadism, not likely, but those are the options that popped in my head. Biff Tannen says, as someone who was used by a partner both financially and emotionally, watching this makes me so glad I just walked away instead of acting revengeful or over the top obsessed. I loved him and was used in a calculated way, but giving that person any more of my time and energy would have been super unhealthy and wasteful. The whole thing is disturbing to watch. Well, good for you, Biff, that you did not give in to that impulse that Danielle seems to be giving into. QA says, she literally says in the beginning she believes he loved her in the beginning and then fell out of love. That means she thinks he married her for love and not for a green card. I can't imagine why someone would fall out of love with a xenophobic jerk face. I censored that just for you, Kirk. So it's hard to know, and it is a question that I've had and questioned a lot of people mull over. Did Muhammad ever love her and ever really want to be with her? Where was that? What was true in his heart? And it's often that question is asked in this show, I think, in wrong-headed ways. But in this one, I think it's a legitimate question. Of course, none of us are going to know. But by the way, you're saying you censored your comment for my sake. Feel free to swear all you want. I swear all the time. I just censor myself on YouTube because I'm worried that I'm gonna get flagged by YouTube or something. Plus, I've learned that a minority of listeners to the podcast don't appreciate it when I swear because it's just not in their wheelhouse. It's not typical for them. But you don't have to censor yourself for me, because in my personal life, I'm fully comfortable with lots of swearing. But if you want to censor yourself, just for the internet, which I kind of recommend, then that's up to you. Hannah says, Danielle basically said something like, I love you. Why do you make me have to hurt you? This is something you hear from domestic violence perpetrators. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of signs. It's kind of a course on how stalking and abusive behavior can develop. I think on the scale of things, it's low, but it's definitely in that realm. The threat of annulment, the threat of deportation, the threats to try to get contact. If you don't see me, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, without ever thinking, does that person even want to be with me? Because if she asked herself that question, honestly, she would know. He has repeatedly said he doesn't want to see me. He doesn't want to be with me. So why am I forcing him into a relationship with me? Well, because, I'm entitled. I don't care about what other people think. I deserve it. I'm desperate. And that's all that matters. That's usually what drives domestic violence perpetration. Anyway. All right, people. And congratulations to Stella Annie for winning the award. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.